Okay, now this is about the first time I went to Vancouver from Sicamous. I was about 11 or 12. Donna was 14 or 15. We went apparently down to Vancouver from Sicamous to pick up Auntie Alice and visit Auntie Flo that lived down in Vancouver. Auntie Alice was married to Uncle Herman. I don't know whose Flo's husband was, but Flo ended up living with my mother later on in years when she had Alzheimer's, but she was such a beautiful little lady, kind of Englishy, and Crawford would be her last name, Flo Crawford, but she'd get up in the morning, she'd come in my mom's trailer out of the bedroom. Oh, what a lovely day it is, even if it was pouring rain or whatever. Well, that's just nice, eh? Some people get crabby when they get old, some get nice, you know. I notice that at care homes all the time. Anyway, Uncle Herman, he had about early 54, I don't know what year that would have been, 55. He had a Dodge car. I mean, it was gray color. They used to take it on 2 trips a year to Sicamous, or maybe just 1 trip a year. But he had doilies on the armrests and everything. It was in beautiful shape. And he ended up selling it to, trading it in on a newer car later in life. God, I bet they loved that car. It was like a collector's car. And I remember he had all the license plates in his garage from all the different years. From way, way back when he first started buying cars. He had a really great collection, that guy. Anyway, I remember the Fraser Canyon. I think I might have told you this before, but I'm doing it again anyway. Fraser Canyon had all kinds of switchbacks, and they were building the Trans-Canada Highway then. So a lot of it was still gravel, you know, and you had to detour, or there were places where they were putting the tunnels through and everything, so it was a hair-raising trip. It was very dangerous, and a lot of slides, and it was dangerous driving down there in those days. And so I guess we stayed at the Finlaysons because I remember looking at the paper thinking about jobs. I wasn't even though I was a young guy, and looking at, thinking how neat it would be to work in one of those big buildings doing something. And I really can't remember what jobs they had, but I remember looking at stuff like that. And me and Lloyd, we actually I don't know if Donna came with us. We walked all the way from Capitol Hill in Burnaby all the way down Hastings to downtown. My aunt used to shop at Save on Meats down there. I always thought Hastings was kind of a funny little place down there. It's really dirty and horrible now, but back then it was still left over from the 40s and 50s when it was actually nice, Hastings. She used to buy her meat down there. We walked all the way downtown. It must be 40 blocks or something like that. But I always remember Auntie Vera, she didn't teach me piano, but I used to watch her. She didn't play piano anymore by the time we went to Vancouver. They did have a little piano there, but she didn't have any reason because she wasn't playing in bands anymore or anything. But she used to do their old stride style, octave chord on the left hand. And Neil was actually a really good piano player, Neil Finlayson. He played Down Yonder and stuff just like his mother. And I remember she always had this glass coffee pot on the stove, and she would make this pot of coffee, and I'm telling you, it would sit there all day simmering till it was just like mud. You could stink the whole house. I mean, everybody smoked in that house too, including me. I guess I was only 12 in that one, or 11. I didn't smoke then, but I think Neil and Reed used to let me smoke. We'd smoke out the back or give me a cigarette to go, because I was already smoking by then pretty near. And I guess, I don't know where Mom and Dad must have stayed. Donna must have slept. They had bedrooms downstairs that they'd put curtains or something down in, and Neil and Reed and Lloyd, I think, all slept down there. So I guess Donna slept up on the couch somewhere, but I remember my mom, or Auntie Vera, she had that coffee pot going. She used to pop a lot of 222s, and she constantly chain smoked Rothman cigarettes or something. But one thing she did make good was peanut butter and lettuce sandwiches, which I really liked. Never had them before, but they're good. I ended up boarding there later on. I'll tell you when I moved to Vancouver, I boarded at that house, so I can tell you more about it then. But I remember their bathroom. They had all these porn magazines in the cupboard in the bathroom. The guys used to go in there, 3 boys living at that house. They'd go in there for Christ, they'd be in there for an hour, trying to, if you have to go to the bathroom, only one bathroom in the house. And then they had Hifty's store up the road. There was a Chinese store. They'd say, hey, why don't you go up to Hifty's and get some milk for us? Well, what do you mean Hifty's? He said, well, because he can't say 50. So every time he gave you a change back, 51, 52, 53, 54. So they just nicknamed it Hifty's. And then I think we went to the PNE that time, but Donna and I were terrified of the roller coaster. We went on some of the other rides. I remember the bumper cars we got in those things. Had a lot of fun on those, but it was so exciting down there at that time. And we went in the scary house. I remember going in there and bumbling around the House of Mirrors. And then they actually had strippers at the PNE back in those days, a burlesque show, because I remember thinking, oh, I'd like to go and see that. A couple of the girls came out with, half clothed, but they didn't. In those days, they wore pasties on their nipples and everything. But they had they had the Battle of the Bands later on in the years. I don't know if they'd had it when I was there at that time yet, but I remember remember seeing the big BC map that they had in that one building where they'd built this huge map with a walkway around the top of it that was like a perfect map of BC with the mountains that stood up, all done in plywood, all the lakes. It was unbelievable. It's stored away somewhere. Maybe one day they'll get it going again. And I remember they had the demolition derby for the cars. We watched that thing, these cars roaring around, banging into each other, wrecking these old... They had one in Kamloops years ago, too, we used to go to, where they weren't hot rods. They were just... They'd get an old car and they'd reinforce it, and they'd go out there and roar around and bang each other. And one thing I do remember is we went into the barns there, looking at all the animals, saw a great big pig laying there with all her little kids. I remember how big her vagina was. That's one thing I remember. Thought, holy crap, look at that thing. Anyway, that's another thing I remember is, I was sleeping there. I was just a kid, so kind of stupid, I guess, but I ended up, they told me I would sleep with Neil, my cousin. Neil was a smart guy. He was like a kind of a scientist type of a guy. I liked him a lot, and Reed was neat. They were all neat, and Lloyd was kind of a rock and roll, but I slept with Neil. He actually molested me in my sleep that night. I just pretended I was dreaming, but I never mentioned it to him later in life. And I did lots of things with Neil later in my life, but never talked about that again. But I'll go into that a little bit more on another chapter. But I really liked Neil. He was a neat guy. I guess he was sort of leaned both ways, or maybe we were just young. He was probably 17, 18 then. But I heard I ran into his friend Dennis Fulcher years later, and he had a boy toy with him, and him and Neil used to go to San Francisco and mess around. So I guess they used to date girls too, so I don't know what the story is there. So anyway, that was my first trip to Vancouver.